Hello, my name is Chris Erdman. I'm a PhD candidate in Roman history, and for the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the basics of how to use some of the most useful and comprehensive online databanks for inscriptions so that you can more easily use epigraphic evidence in your own research. I think that one of the most daunting tasks when working with inscriptions for the first time is simply trying to find inscriptions relevant to your project. And while there is no single database that catalogs all Greek and Latin inscriptions, there are hundreds of thousands of them, and tens of thousands are added every year. Uh, there are a few very useful databases that can at least get you started. So we're starting off here with EDR, which I think is certainly one of the most useful databases, and it works basically the same way as pretty much all of the others. EDR has cataloged tens of thousands of inscriptions, mostly in Latin, but also in Greek, mostly pertaining to the Roman world. They have searchable texts, bibliographical material, etc. And immediately we can see on the search bar, on the sidebar here, there are two very important tabs. One is the search function, the other one is the user's guide. If we go to the user's guide first, you can see that it lists and explains all of the relevant search features that you can use when you use the search tab. I'm not really going to explain these. They're pretty self-evident, and it explains them for you. One thing to note is that you will have to use the correct keywords. For example, if we were to search by material, we would want to go to table 2. And if we were searching for, say, inscriptions written on wood, we wouldn't write wood in, we would have to write lignum. If we were searching for inscriptions dealing with the emperor and his household, we would need to use IMP dot, etc. If you don't use the correct keywords, the database won't be able to read it. It won't understand what you're looking for, and you'll get nothing. EDR has put these all up in tables for you. They're all in the same place, so it's relatively easy to find them. The most common search I think that you'll do is probably a text search to look for inscriptions with a particular name or a particular place or phrase, etc. So we go to advanced search here, which just opens up a few more options that can be useful. We go down to text. EDR allows you to search for inscriptions without worrying about brackets, line breaks, dots, etc. You can just put in a string of words and it will try to find them regardless. You can also search for several different strings of words at the same time, which can be very useful. But we're just going to keep it very simple. We're going to do a simple search for uxor. You can see that we have quite a lot of hits. Uxor is a very common word in inscriptions, unsurprisingly. Going through the entries, we can see that EDR will record for you all of the relevant search data. So if you want to search for a similar inscription, that can be very useful. Then it gives you the text as it would appear in an edition. And note that EDR will always search for the exact set of letters in the exact order that you give it, regardless of whether, for example, as here, there is an abbreviation. If it is reconstructed in square brackets, it will still give it to you. If it is, for example, here in an oblique case, in the dative, it will still give it to you if the case ending is just appended to what you have actually input. So that can be very useful if you want to search, for example, all of EDR's entries for that contain a particular name, and you don't care about the case of the name, so you can just put in the root and then not worry about the case endings, and it will give you everything regardless of gender, regardless of case endings. The other search that you'll probably be doing is for publication. For example, if you already know the publication information for your inscription. So for an example here, we're going to search for a very famous inscription, the Laudatio Turiae. In the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinorum, that is CIL volume 6, entry 41062. And we see that here is our inscription. You should note that you have to input the bibliographical entry exactly correctly. So if we go to the user's guide and go down to editions, you can see there are two tables here that list the abbreviations that EDR uses. All the databases are going to be like this, but they may not use the same abbreviations. So if we go here to Corpora, you can see that CIL is handily listed as CIL, Corpus Inscriptionum Latinorum. Most of these are going to be the same across different databases, but you do want to check the abbreviations will vary. You also want to make sure that you get the entry numbers correct. You can see that EDR for the CIL does 2 digits for the volume number, comma, and then 5 digits for the entry. If your entry is shorter than 5 digits, you'll have to add some zeros at the beginning. You can see that the inscription has been republished in ILS. This is the format that you would use in EDR for ILS with 4 digits. It's been republished, for example, in FIRA. You would have to do this. If you don't do that, it won't work. It's not always the same from database to database, so you have to make sure to check their documentation. It's always pretty easy to find, and you may have to play around with this a little bit. If it doesn't work immediately, it might not be that your inscription doesn't exist or hasn't been cataloged. It might just be that you put in the information incorrectly, so it may take a few tries. Now that we have the Laudatio Turiae here, we can quickly discuss some of the pros and cons of using an online database like this as opposed to a print edition. So one obvious pro is that information from several different editions and publications is all collected here and easily available at a glance. You don't have to crawl through commentaries to find it. It gives you a very easy searchable text, which is very nice. For EDR at least, if available, you also have these lovely photos. EDR will collect any photographs that they can find in print editions, museum catalogs. Sometimes they'll take their own photos if they're available. And this is very useful. Epigraphers recently are more and more coming to the agreement that being able to see the context of an inscription, being able to understand how you would have interacted with it, how big it is, what impression it makes on the viewer, is just as important as having the actual text. And it can also be useful to see things that simply the printed version won't tell you. So for example, the first line here, we have Oxorus. We don't know from the printed text that Oxorus, as we can see from the photographs, is written in letters 3 times as large as the rest of the inscription. That can be useful information. How the inscription is laid out won't be available in the printed version. Now, that said, a couple of drawbacks. The first is that the online databases aren't going to give you the full breadth of information that a print edition was. EDR is actually very good about this, but for example, if you look at the Apparatus Criticus, EDR just tells you where to look to get the Apparatus Criticus. It does not, in fact, give you the Apparatus Criticus on its own. Similarly, there's no commentary. If you want a commentary, you will have to go to the publications. And obviously, the biggest drawback of the databases is that they're not complete. Like I said, there are hundreds of thousands of inscriptions. Digitizing them is an involved process, especially when more are being found every year. So if we go to an inscription that I've worked on, so I know it exists, the so-called Lex Gabinia Calpurnia de Insolidelo. In CIL, that is CIL 01 2500, and you see that we have to add a 0 to the beginning there so that we have our 5 digits. My input was correct. This is the proper format. EDR doesn't have it. If we go to another database, the Epigraphic Datenbank Klaus Slaby, which is a little clunkier to use, doesn't give you the full information, but you see the same exact entry. They do have it. The text isn't necessarily as pretty. It doesn't give you as much information, but not all the databases are going to have exactly the same information. So you may have to try a couple if you're not getting anything at EDR. And of course, eventually you'll want to get your hands on the print editions. The online databases should always be used as a starting point for a research project, as a search tool, but they're not the be-all and end-all. You're eventually going to want to go to those print editions, and you're going to want to check the CIL, IG, AE, whatever. So speaking of which, now is a good time to mention other databases. EDCS is here, but EDR is also a part of the Eagle Network, which is this large multi-institutional project to digitize as many inscriptions as possible. So it includes EDH, the Heidelberg database, the epigraphic database Bari, Hispania Epigraphica. These are all very similar in function and form to EDR. You can also, for Latin inscriptions that are published in the CIL, you can use the CIL's site, which is searchable, but it's a little clunky. It won't give you the full epigraphic information, bibliographical information, the way that EDR might, because it'll only give you the CIL information. And in general, I think it's not as good as a starting point as something like EDR. For Greek inscriptions, there is IG Online, which is actually quite good and works similarly. The Packard Humanities Institute has a digitized set of Greek inscriptions. It's not complete. It's mostly IG and the supplementary volumes, but it's pretty good. And if you're looking for Athenian inscriptions, Attic Inscriptions Online is actually excellent. It's very easy to search, and it will give you translations, commentary, footnotes. It's a very good resource, but it's very specific to Athenian inscriptions. Now, finally, there are two resources that anyone using inscriptions ought to know. AE, Late Epigraphic, and the SEG, the Supplementum Epigraphicum Graecum. These are both available in print, but they're also available online. AE is a catalog of every publication dealing with inscriptions year by year. It's available on JSTOR, where you can search it. You can also look at each year individually if you want to. And just keep in mind that to search here, you have to use JSTOR's search parameters. So if we wanted to search for the Laudatio Torii, for example, we would have to use quotation marks. Otherwise, we'll get searches for Laudatio and Torii. We want both. Two things of note. Late Epigraphic is published in French, so keep that in mind if you're searching for keywords. The search can be a little bit clunky. Also, the index is very useful. So if you do want to go year by year and use the index, it's very thorough, it's very redundant, it's excellent. But the online version of Late Epigraphic lags behind by a couple of years. So if you have access to the print version in a research library, I would do an online search first and then go to the print edition and then check the indices for the most recent couple of years, because they won't be on JSTOR yet. The SEG is very similar. Unfortunately, it's not free, but most research libraries will have a subscription. If not, your department may. You can search by keywords. You can search by any of the place, period. Also by bibliographical reference, and it will do the same thing. It gives you the bibliographical information for an inscription or a set of inscriptions that you're looking for. Very useful if you're trying to track down the most recent edition or the most recent commentary and you're not quite sure what it is. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. Inscriptions can be incredibly daunting, but with this information, I hope that you can get started on your own searches and start using inscriptions more in your own research.